Welcome to The Debate. It is January 27th, 2026. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group has arrived in the Middle East, and President Trump is using a phrase you rarely hear in naval warfare doctrine to describe the projection of American power. He's calling it a beautiful armada. So we are looking at a high-stakes convergence of military hardware and, well, presidential rhetoric targeting the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the waters of the Persian Gulf are getting very crowded.
Crowded is an understatement. It feels less like a strategic deployment and more like a high-stakes gamble with very expensive chips. We have a massive deployment of firepower, genuine confusion over whether there is one fleet or two, and explicit geographically specific threats from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, against U.S. allies. So the question we really need to answer isn't just about the ships, it's about the signal. Is this beautiful armada a masterstroke of diplomatic leverage to force a deal, or is it a generator of accidental war?
I'm taking the position that this is a calculated, and I'd argue necessary, application of leverage. This buildup is not the prelude to an invasion, it is the prelude to a handshake. It's designed to shatter the calcified status quo and force Tehran to the table, a goal the president has explicitly stated is, within reach.
And I will argue the opposite. I believe this strategy fails because it relies on ambiguity in an environment that requires absolute precision. By mixing mixed messages with nuclear-powered warships, the U.S. is not creating leverage, it is creating a fog of war before the first shot is even fired. You're pushing the region toward a conflict that neither side actually controls because the signaling is just so messy.
Okay, let's start with the intent, because that is where the signal is actually strongest if you're listening to the right frequency. If you look at the transcript of President Trump's speech in Iowa just yesterday, the objective is surprisingly transparent. He didn't say, "We are going to destroy them." He said, quote, "I hope they make a deal." He described the situation as being in flux.
In flux is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It is the correct diplomatic term, though. It means the cement hasn't dried. The president told Axios that Iranian officials have called on numerous occasions. Now, whether you take that literally or, as a figure of speech, the assessment driving the White House is that Tehran is desperate. They are facing internal protests, economic strain, and now a carrier strike group parked on their doorstep. The beautiful armada is essentially the final variable in an equation designed to solve for yes. It's classic compellence strategy.
Compellence versus deterrence.
Exactly. Deterrence is don't do X or I will hit you. Compellence is I will squeeze you until you do Y. The U.S. is applying compellence. The goal is to make the status quo so unbearable for the Ayatollah that a new deal becomes the path of least resistance.
See, here's my problem with your compellence theory. It only works if the target understands clearly what they need to do to stop the pain and understands clearly the scale of the threat. My issue isn't with the concept of pressure, it's with the execution of the signal. You mentioned the Iowa speech. Let's look at the confusion that speech generated. Trump said, by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating toward Iran right now. Now, we know the USS Abraham Lincoln arrived Monday. So is the Lincoln the beautiful armada, or is there a second fleet, a ghost fleet that nobody else is tracking?
But does it matter if it's one or two? The point is the perception of overwhelming power.
In military signaling, it matters arguably more than anything else. If I am an Iranian commander sitting in a bunker near Bandar Abbas, and I see one carrier on my radar, but I'm told there are two, I have to assume the second one is in a stealth posture or preparing a surprise flank from the Indian Ocean. That doesn't make me want to pick up the phone. It makes me want to put my missile forces on a hair trigger alert. It creates paranoia, not compliance. And we are seeing that reaction. President Masoud Pezeshkian isn't talking about deals. He's warning that this rhetoric is destabilizing the entire region. He sounds like a man bracing for impact, not preparing a negotiating team.
I think you're reading the public posturing too literally. Pezeshkian has to sound tough for his domestic audience. Remember, he has the hardliners in the IRGC breathing down his neck and protesters in the streets. But let's look at the U.S. rationale for keeping the military option visible. It's not just about the nuclear file anymore. Washington is looking at the crackdown on protests inside Iran. By keeping the naval assets, the air wing, the destroyers visible, the administration is linking the survival of the regime to its behavior regarding its own people. They are effectively saying, if you want to stay in power, you need to talk to us.
But that linkage is exactly why this is so dangerous. If you tell a regime, we might attack you because of how you treat your own citizens, you are threatening their sovereignty, not just their foreign policy. That is an existential threat. And when a regime, like the Islamic Republic, feels existentially threatened, they don't open up. They clamp down. They circle the wagons. The reports of a finger on the trigger from the Iranian military aren't bluffs. They are the standard operating procedure for a cornered animal. You are expecting a rational diplomatic response to what they perceive as a threat of regime change.
I disagree that they view it as regime change. They view it as a transaction. The president keeps using the word deal. That is transactional language. And honestly, the presence of the USS Abraham Lincoln is also about reassuring the rest of the neighborhood. It's a security guarantee. It tells the Gulf states, we are here to stabilize the balance of power.
Is it reassuring them? Because from where I'm sitting, the neighbors look terrified. Look at Saudi Arabia.
The Saudis are always cautious. It's in their nature.
This isn't caution, it's distancing. They are publicly disavowing the U.S. strategy. According to AFP, Riyadh has explicitly stated they will not allow their airspace or territory to be used for any attack on Iran. That is a profound statement. That is a frantic attempt to paint a do not target symbol on their roof. If the beautiful armada was a security guarantee, the Saudis would be quietly coordinating logistics. Instead, they are loudly announcing their neutrality. They know that a U.S. carrier is a magnet for conflict, and they don't want to be caught in the magnetic field.
You have to read between the lines with Riyadh, though. They live next door to the IRGC. They are within missile range. Of course, they have to declare neutrality publicly to avoid immediate retaliation from Iranian proxies. But privately, a check on Iranian aggression benefits them more than anyone. The U.S. presence allows them to play the good cop while the carrier group plays the bad cop. It's a symbiotic relationship, even if the press releases say otherwise.
But Iran isn't playing cops and robbers. They are drawing specific red lines in the sand regarding the geography of the Gulf. We need to discuss Mohammed Akbarzada.
The political deputy of the IRGC Naval Forces.
Right? His statement wasn't vague rhetoric about great Satans. It was operational. He said if neighboring countries' soil, sky, or waters are used against Iran, they are considered hostile. He is effectively telling Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, if a single U.S. jet launches from your runway, you are at war with us.
Which is precisely why you need the carrier group. Without the USS Lincoln, that threat stands unchallenged. You cannot allow a regional power to dictate the foreign policy of sovereign nations through intimidation. My view is that the Armada functions as a shield. It tells the IRGC, you do not get to bully the Gulf. It raises the cost of Iranian aggression to a level they cannot afford. The Lincoln brings an entire air wing, dozens of Super Hornets, Growlers for electronic warfare, Hawkeyes for command and control. That dominates the airspace.
That logic holds up in a textbook or maybe in the open ocean, but not in the Persian Gulf. The geography works against you. The Strait of Hormuz is a choke point. You park a massive carrier group there, and you have just placed a high-value target within range of thousands of short-range missiles, fast attack craft, and drone swarms. If Iran feels the flux is shifting toward war, they might decide to strike first, not at the carrier, which is hard to sink, but at the oil infrastructure of the neighbors hosting the Americans. That is the hostile action they are warning about. The Armada doesn't protect the Saudis from that, it arguably provokes it.
Let's look at the mechanism of that provocation, or rather, the communication of it. You called it chaos earlier. I call it strategic ambiguity.
I think chaos was being charitable.
Now, hear me out. Strategic ambiguity is a valid tool in international relations. When President Trump uses flowery language like beautiful armada or claims he knows they want a deal, he is seizing the narrative control. He told Axios, they want to make a deal, I know so. That confidence creates a reality distortion field that favors the U.S. It signals that the outcome is inevitable. Whether the second armada exists or not is psychological warfare.
It keeps the Iranian leadership guessing. In a negotiation, if your opponent is unsure of the scale of force arrayed against them, they become risk-averse. They hesitate. That hesitation is where the deal happens.
Or where the miscalculation happens. You are assuming the Iranian leadership consumes this media the way a U.S. voter does, but they are looking at radar screens and intelligence reports. If Trump says another armada is coming and they don't see it, they might assume it's a bluff, which reduces U.S. credibility. If they do see movement that looks like an invasion force, maybe a submarine deployment we don't know about, but Trump says, "I just want a phone call," the signals cross.
Because if the situation is in flux, as the president said, it means war isn't decided. If he wanted war, the rhetoric would be about evil, destruction, and imminent threats. Instead, he's talking about phone calls. He is practically inviting them to de-escalate without losing face. He's saying, look at this beautiful weapon I have. Don't make me use it. Just call me. It's a golden bridge for them to retreat across.
A golden bridge built on phantom fleets? We still don't know if that second armada is real. And that brings me back to the risk. The IRGC has stated they are ready for war. We have reports of hair-trigger alert statuses. Let's just paint a scenario. An American drone strays too close to an Iranian patrol boat in this environment. The local Iranian commander, hearing about an armada coming to destroy him, thinks this is the start of the attack. He fires. Then the Lincoln fires back. Then the Saudis get hit in retaliation. The deal evaporates in about 15 minutes of kinetic exchange. You cannot effectively negotiate when the gun is pressed explicitly against the temple. The hand tends to shake.
And yet, historically, the handshake often comes right after the fist is clenched. The Lincoln Strike Group brings massive defensive capabilities. Aegis destroyers like the USS O'Kane and USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. are likely there. They create a defensive bubble that neutralizes Iran's ability to strike cheaply with ballistic missiles. It changes their calculus from, maybe we can harass them, to, we will lose everything. Rational actors choose survival.
You were betting the house on the rationality of a theocratic regime facing internal revolt? This is the other variable we haven't touched enough on. Pezeshkian and the IRGC might decide that a limited conflict with the Great Satan is exactly what they need to unite the country and silence the protesters. External enemies are great for domestic approval ratings.
That is the diversionary war theory. It's a risk, I admit.
It's a huge risk.
But is it a bigger risk than allowing Iran to continue its current trajectory? The administration has clearly decided that doing nothing is the greater danger. They are forcing a decision point. They are looking at the protest and saying, now is the time to push. If Iran tries to start a diversionary war, they run into the teeth of the US Navy. That is a suicide pact, not a diversion.
Unless they keep it asymmetrical. Cyber attacks, mining the strait, hitting soft targets in Dubai or Riyadh. Things the beautiful armada can't easily shoot down.
But that brings us back to the president's framing. He believes they want a deal. He said, I know they want to make a deal. If his intelligence is correct, and remember, the president sees briefings we don't, then the bluster from the IRGC is just noise. It's the last gasp of resistance before the capitulation.
Or it's the intelligence that's wrong. We've seen that before.
Perhaps. But look at the alternative perspective. The U.S. deployment forces clarity. It forces Iran to decide, are you a revolutionary cause, or are you a nation-state that wants to survive? If it's the latter, you make the deal.
I think it forces clarity, but of the wrong kind. It clarifies to the world that U.S. foreign policy is currently being run on brinksmanship, and it clarifies to the neighbors that they are on their own if things go sideways. The Saudi refusal to participate is the canary in the coal mine. They see the danger, even if Washington doesn't. They are listening to the specific threats about their soil and sky and taking them at face value.
Positions. I see the beautiful armada, whether singular or plural, as the necessary muscle behind a diplomatic push. The president has identified that Iran is vulnerable, and he is using the USS Abraham Lincoln to compel a behavioral change. The flux is the window of opportunity for a new deal.
And I conclude that the window is actually a blast radius. The lack of clarity on the number of ships, combined with the explicit red lines the IRGC has drawn on the neighboring states, creates a scenario where a misunderstanding becomes a catastrophe. You can call it leverage, but it looks a lot like lighting a match to see better in a dynamite factory.
It is certainly a complex puzzle. We have domestic protests in Tehran, American carriers in the Gulf, and a president who speaks in broad, optimistic strokes while holding a very heavy hammer.
In flux is indeed the right phrase. Whether that flux settles into a treaty or erupts into the conflict the IRGC is warning about is, well, the question of the year.
A fascinating, if tense, moment in geopolitics. We will have to see if the beautiful armada delivers the beautiful deal.
Or if the ready for war rhetoric becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We hope this helps you parse the signal from the noise. Keep analyzing. Goodbye.